and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Good luck and Godspeed.
Have you ever had a premonition, a feeling that something dreadful was about to happen?
No, Mother, I have not been drinking.
Do you happen to have a pair of birds that are just friendly?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I have to go back into the past once more, just once more.
This is HitchPod, a podcast counting down the 20 best movies of the wonderful 20th century director Alfred Hitchcock. I'm Kat Jones and with me is Dan Libke, and in this episode we're comparing the 18th best Hitchcock movie, Spellbound, with the movie that the Oscars deemed to be the best one from that year, which is A Lost Weekend.
Yes, The Lost Weekend. Billy Wilder directed that one.
He directed loads of things.
He did, yeah. We'll go through that shortly.
Mostly after this one, right? This was one of his early...
Yeah, but before we get on to The Lost Weekend, we do like to give clues as to what our next movie might be, right?
That's right. We're giving a clue to what we're going to be covering next. Spellbound was the 18th best Hitchcock. This is a cryptic clue for the 17th best, which we're doing in a week or two, in a couple of weeks. At the end of the movie, we'll let you know what this movie is and which one we'll be rewatching. So this is the cryptic clue. See if you can work it out before the end of the episode. So it's 3 words, 5 letters, 3 letters, 8 letters, no guy parts, and a selection of actresses plain, no centerfolds for this English Hitchcock film.
All right. That's no guy parts and a selection of actresses plain, no centerfolds for this English Hitchcock film. That's quite a convoluted clue. So good luck solving that as you listen to the rest of this podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Pay attention to everything
Yes.
as you work out the cryptic clue.
Yes. All right. So as we mentioned, this movie is The Lost Weekend. This is the Best Picture winner from 1945. It has an IMDb rating of 7.9 out of 10 and a Rotten Tomatoes score of 97%, which you might think is impressive, but it's not actually the best Rotten Tomatoes score for a movie that returns when you search for The Lost Weekend. Because I did that when searching for this one, and there's a 100% Rotten Tomatoes score for one that's a 2022 documentary about John Lennon. So there you go. So it's got 100%, but based on only five reviews so far, nevertheless.
Yes.
As we mentioned, it's won the Academy Award for the Best Picture. It's also the Best Actor, Ray Milland, Best Director, Billy Wilder, and the Best Writing of a Screenplay, Charles Brackett's and Billy Wilder. And you can get it via all the usual places, Amazon and iTunes. It stars Ray Milland, who we've seen previously. He was in Dial In for Murder. Yep. He plays Don Burnham in this particular movie. We've also seen Jane Wyman. She was also in a Hitchcock movie. Which one was she?
Stage Fright.
Yes, that's right. She plays Helen St. James in this particular movie. And poor old Philip Terry never got to work with Hitchcock, but he plays Ray Milland's brother, Wick Burnham.
What a great name,
Wick. Yeah, it sounds like someone with a speech impediment, right?
It sounds like it might be short for something, but it's actually not. It's just a name.
Yes. Anyway, the synopsis of this particular movie is the desperate life of a chronic alcoholic is followed through a 4-day drinking bout. And it was written by Charles Jackson. He did the novel, Charles R. Jackson, sorry. Don't want to omit the middle initial there and cause grave offence. And it was adapted by Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder. They did the screenplay. And as we mentioned, it was directed by Billy Wilder in the style of a drama/film noir.
Yes.
And
even though it kind of sounds like it should be a rom-com.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's a terrible title.
Yeah. And it's, it's got the tagline, "How daring can the screen dare to be? No adult man or woman can risk missing the startling frankness of The Lost Weekend." There you go.
Again, you think there's going to be a more dramatic title there at the end of that?
Yes. So, so we're going to get into the plot of this shortly. Should you go away and watch this movie, Kat?
Oh, we're doing spoilers right up front. I will never watch this movie again. Once was enough.
Once was definitely enough. But anyway.
But we think you should. This is a very important film about the terrors of drinking too heavily.
Yes.
It'll put anyone off drinking.
Yes.
And even though we may make fun of some of the drinking themes, it's definitely not a subject to joke about. We're really just making fun, perhaps, of the actor.
Yes. There may be a few jokes jokes about the specific character in this movie, but no real offence intended towards alcoholics or alcoholism.
It's a very
in general.
serious topic,
Yeah, exactly.
and it is. In fact, this is a very serious film.
It's a very serious film, which we're going to make fun of. It's pretty much starting now, right?
Yeah. Okay. Go on. Then give us a plot.
All right. So we start with Don Burnham. This is Ray Milland and his brother Wick, the previously discussed Wick, and they're packing for a weekend away. And we learn almost immediately that Don is an alcoholic. He's got a secret bottle of, I think it's rye whiskey. It could be Scotch whiskey. I wasn't entirely clear exactly what kind of liquor it was, but he does say rye whiskey at one point. So I'm just going to call it rye whiskey.
I think
throughout.
in the US, it's rye whiskey, right?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Anyway, he's got this secret bottle and it's hanging out the window. He's kind of dangled it out the window on the end of a rope, hoping that no one will spot it and he can sneak it in at some point and smuggle it away on vacation with him. Before he can do that, his girlfriend Helen pops in to visit, and she's got 2 tickets for a concert, and she wants him to go with her to this concert before he leaves on this 5-day weekend. It's a very long weekend anyway. He doesn't particularly want to go to the concert. He just wants to stay home and get some serious drinking done. So he manages to somehow convince Wick to go with her instead. Wick,
She was actually going to go on her own.
I think so.
And then he said, no, I want to go. And then he said, no. So actually, Wick, you can go.
Yeah, but I mean, she didn't really want to go on her own. If she wanted to go on her own, she would have just gone on her own. She wouldn't have popped up to have a chat.
Yeah.
Anyway, Wick is a little bit suspicious of this plan to send him off to the concert with his
Rightly
girlfriend.
so.
And he eventually discovers the bottle of whiskey and he pours it down the sink. And only then, once he's confident that Don has no more access to alcohol and no money to buy anymore, he heads off. But shortly after he does, there's a visit from the cleaning woman, and she basically helps alert Don to where a stash of cash is hidden in the sugar bowl.
Yeah. We
And
work out this is it's $10, but it's the equivalent of about $150.
Yeah, so it's a veritable fortune for Don. So he sends the cleaning woman on her way, and he sneaks off to the local bar and he buys 2 bottles of whiskey there. He's got some elaborate scheme how he's going to trick Wick into finding one of them, and then he'll sneak the other one in somehow. But
into Wick's suitcase.
yeah, that's right. That was the detail. Yeah. Anyway, but while he's waiting for them to come back from the concert, he decides, I'll just hang around at the bar and drink myself silly at the bar. But he stays too long, despite telling the bartender, let me know when it's time to leave. The bartender tries to alert him, but he's still too busy
Still wants
drinking.
to drink,
Yep.
yeah. Misses his cue.
Yep. Misses getting back in time to go on vacation, so he kind of sneaks back into the room while they're all kind of furious at him. They're both furious at him and wondering where he is, and he just spends the night at home getting drunk. So the next day he goes back to the bar and he meets up with the bartender again, and he gives this flashback story of how he and Helen first met, and go back in time, and we get a classic coat check mix-up meet cute, which is they've both checked their coats at going to a concert, and somehow he's got her ticket. He sneaks out very early on because he's got a
bottle
hankering
of
for drinking. Yeah,
bottle of rye in his pocket.
Yep.
His coat pocket.
So, but when he goes there, he tries to get his coat back, and all he gets is her coat. So he has to wait till the end of the show before he can. Before she comes back to get her coat, and then they could swap. So that's all good. And this is also where so they meet up and they go out and they have a decent time. And he also at one point around here he gets an opportunity to meet Helen's parents, but he kind of avoids that as well because he overhears them disapproving of him. Despite the fact they've never met him, they disapprove, which I think is just the default position of parents in the 1940s.
Yeah.
And also in the 1940s, it was very easy for men like Don here to just hide away. Like if you wanted to slink into a crowd, you could do it very easily because you're all dressed in the same way. You've got a hat and a suit.
We've talked about this before. I can't tell them apart when they're all wearing their same old suits.
Yeah, so he avoids meeting the parents, and then she's a bit furious about this, and she comes back and tries to confront him about what went on, and Wick actually covers for him. Wick says, I've been drinking and he came back to help me, and that bottle that you see there on the ground is mine.
You get the feeling that Wick's been covering for him for some time. It was a very smooth cover.
Yeah. But Don actually doesn't let Wick cover for him. Don kind of bursts out of the room he's hiding in and says, no, I'm the drunk, this is take me or leave me. And she takes him. So that's perhaps not a great move on her part. Anyway, so that's basically the flashback. And because Don thinks of himself as a writer, he apparently had some great gifts as a writer back in his college
Primary
years.
school?
Yeah, primary school perhaps, yeah. My School Holidays by Don, age 8. He decides, all right, I've got this great idea for a story. I'm going to go back home and I'm going to write a novel about my experiences. And he sits down and he gets as far as a title. I think the title's The Bottle. He writes his name and...
Would have been a much better title for the movie, by the way.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah. And he does a dedication to his girlfriend, and then he decides, all right, that's enough writing for the night.
I'm going to have a drink, yeah.
I'm going to have a drink, and he immediately is about to get hammered, but he's forgotten where he's hid the second bottle from the night before. He came home all drunk, and he decided there was a chance he might get caught, so he hid it away in a
light fitting,
at the top of the house. Yeah. So he has to go out to a nightclub instead, and he does so and spends the rest of the night drinking there. He doesn't really have enough money left over to pay for the bill, so he steals a woman's purse who happens to be sitting beside him. But he also gets busted doing that. He's too drunk to get away with such handiwork, and he's kicked out of the club. And he has to head home again. But luckily, when he does arrive home, he does find the spare bottle of whiskey. It's illuminated by the light being switched on. So again, he gets drunk and drinks it all. But this kind of leaves him now in the position where the next day, I think this is day 3, Saturday, he has no more money and no more alcohol. So he's in a bit of strife now. So he decides to get some money. He's going to take his typewriter and he's going to pawn it at a pawn shop. But they're all closed. They're closed for Yom Kippur because apparently every single pawn shop is owned by a Jewish person.
Yeah.
So instead he goes to visit Gloria, who's some kind of bizarro prostitute who will give him money in exchange for him kissing her. So he does that. Gloria is also a little bit annoying. She tends to abbreviate words. Instead of saying don't be ridiculous, she's always saying don't be ridic.
Yeah.
And other things like that. So she's a little bit of an annoying character.
That was pretty common in movies in the 40s,
Yeah.
that kind of weird abbreviation. It seemed to ring a few bells.
Yeah. Anyway, I didn't particularly like it. And... But
I certainly didn't like all of these women falling over themselves in love with him.
Yeah.
That was incredibly unbelievable.
Yes. So unbelievable that before he can take the money that she gave him and buy any more alcohol, he falls down the stairs and knocks himself unconscious. And then he wakes up the next morning in an alcoholics ward at a local hospital. And one of the nurses warns him that he's about to get, these terrible side effects from the alcoholism because they're cutting him off. And pretty much as a live demonstration of the side effects he may receive. Another one of the patients suddenly starts seeing Beatles, and this was 15 years before the Beatles even got together. So it's but the Beatles are crawling all over him, and he's
that would be petrifying, right?
It would be, John,
particularly Ringo.
Get off. Yeah. Anyway, he panics, and all the nurses run to his assistance, and in the ensuing chaos, Don escapes back home. So, but we have been forewarned, and now here comes Don's hallucinations. So he starts seeing like a mouse in the wall, and then a bat flies in and starts attacking the mouse, and he freaks out and collapses. And his landlady, who's kind of just been listening into all of this, calls Helen, and she comes to sort it all out. And she stays the night and looks after him. And that kind of leads us to the final day of this long-term binge. And he wakes up early and he sneaks out again and he pawns her coat.
And she's wearing this coat in every single scene.
Yeah.
And it was about time that they pawned that coat.
Oh, it's a very precious coat. It was made of the symbolism that brought them together. So by pawning it, he's officially breaking up with her. But she discovers when she goes to try and get it back that Don didn't get money for the coat. He instead got himself a gun, which feels very ominous. So she races back home to check on him and eventually managed to talk some sense into him. The local bartender shows up and he's somehow found his typewriter. I'm not quite sure.
I think he left it there at the bar.
Did he? Okay. I thought he was trying to pawn it. Oh, yeah, he left it and then went to go see Gloria. That's right, yeah. Anyway, the bartender gives the typewriter back and she's particularly satisfied with this and says, you should stop being an alcoholic and start writing a novel. So he says, okay, I'll stop being an alcoholic, and starts writing his novel, and that's the end of the movie.
There you go. And they all lived happily ever after.
Presumably, yeah. I can't see anything going wrong with any of this relationship.
No, never.
Yeah. So what were the highlights for you of this particular movie, Kat?
Well, there weren't many highlights in this particular movie. I mean, we watched it to the end. It felt incredibly long.
Yeah. It wasn't technically as long as the previous two Oscar movies we watched, right? The
Right.
previous two were both 3 hours long. This
Yeah.
one was just an hour and 40 or something.
Yeah, so that's good. I mean, it was supposed to have some dark and dry humour, but I found the humour was absent.
Yeah, I didn't spot much humour at all in this particular movie.
And it was what did you think of it? I didn't enjoy it very much.
Yeah, it left me pretty cold too. I think Wick, the brother, he had the right idea. He checked out of the movie pretty early on and headed off on vacation to a different, presumably went to the John Wick series of movies and where he's a hitman or something.
It was fabulous the way he vanished. He really just left. He was kind of symbolic of the fact that when people are alcoholics, people do sometimes just, that's it, I'm out.
Yep.
And he kind of did from being, he's one of those long-suffering people that someday they just crack. And then off he goes on his weekend. We never see him again. It would have been fabulous if the movie could have I would have liked to have watched the movie where we followed him on his vacation. Yeah, that's right.
It did also occur to me that this is this like the Train Spotting of 1945?
Oh, it absolutely is. Definitely.
Yeah, dealing with these, addiction issues and all that kind of stuff.
Did Trainspotting win some Academy Awards?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't. It certainly didn't win Best Picture, but it may have won. May have had some Best Actor nominations.
Yeah.
For young Ewan McGregor.
I mean, I think the ending of the movie, on the surface, it was supposed to be a bit happy and positive, but everyone knows that his alcoholism is not cured by putting one cigarette into his drink.
You would hope everyone knows this, but I'm not convinced in 1945 that this. Oh, maybe they were. I'm not convinced. I mean, this is supposedly one of the earliest, or maybe the earliest film to take alcoholism seriously.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why it was critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
It's a very worthy movie. And prior to this, drunk characters in movies were, figures of fun. We've seen them in Hitchcock movies. We've seen the drunk farmhand come in and he's, comic relief and he's out of his mind. But
this one really treated alcohol, addiction as a sickness, which is as it should be.
Yep.
So I'm not sure because we did hear a number of times from Wick and from Helen that and from the drunk guy himself that he would go in cycles where he would have weeks and weeks at a time where he was good and then he would always relapse.
Yeah.
So I think that's the impression we're supposed to get at the end.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he might have written, I don't know, another 2 or 3 lines.
Yeah, could easily have retyped up that dedication page.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think when the movie started, they said something like it had been 5 or 6 weeks since he'd done anything, but I'm not entirely convinced about that, seeing as he had a bottle dangling out the window. So maybe Wick thought it was 5 or 6 weeks, but it was much shorter. Apparently, the liquor industry didn't like the idea of this movie. This is a bit of a trend in the Best Picture movies we've watched because the Mafia didn't like The Godfather either.
Right.
So the liquor industry was trying to claim that this would cause prohibition to be reinstated because everybody would become so horrified by the dangers.
I think
of
it's
drinking.
probably more likely that everyone went out and had a drink afterwards.
Yes.
It was interesting that it was film noir, and there were a lot of elements of film noir, but there were no gangsters, and there was barely a gun.
Yeah, there's that. There's just
it was incredible.
Kind of gun at the end, which wasn't really for any. It was not for any crime. Like there were no crimes being. Well, so minor thieving was perhaps the only crime, right?
Yeah.
Just a little bit of pickpocketing.
So I think that was really quite clever. Those elements of noirs, particularly in the addiction ward, all the dark shadows, and there were a lot of close-ups on Don's face as he became inebriated, and he was a pretty good drunk. I mean, there was a few comical moments where he was crazy stupid.
But he wasn't doing like the over the top slurred. But like for very bad actors, you all know what a drunk bad actor sounds like, and that's terrible. And he certainly wasn't doing that, right? He wasn't.
No, and most alcoholics don't.
No,
in fact, slur this. So it was fairly realistic, I think.
Yeah,
and he did do a bit of method. He did a bit of method acting in this.
Yeah, so he apparently got into character. He checked into an actual drunk ward at a hospital. And apparently he also tried to check out because things got a little bit too chaotic and noisy and weird for him. So, but he ducked out in a dressing gown and pretty much like the same as in the movie. But the real life authorities were a little bit better than the film versions.
Oh, yeah, and they got him.
A policeman spotted him, didn't believe his story, and saw like the logo on the dressing gown or something, and took him back
dragged him
inside.
back. Great,
and,
that's fantastic.
He was able to explain it though. It took a little bit of time to sort it out. Apparently, about half an hour to sort it out because there was the chaos drunk award. But despite the realism, there was not always the kind of reaction that Wilder might have wanted to the performance, right?
Yeah, so there were some early test screenings where the audience just laughed at his performance, but I think that's partly historical too, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to laugh at the drunk.
Yep.
And that was probably early on before they realised that this is actually quite a serious problem. But actually, putting the music score behind it with a theremin really saved the day.
Yeah.
That's really quite mournful music, and it kind of established the mood. So I think the studio did a good job of that.
Yep. They did think about canning it apparently, but the theremin came to the rescue. What about some director insights from Wilder?
Well, he was coming off Double Indemnity, right, which we have seen and covered on our Patreon feed as a Hitchcock similarity film. And so Raymond Chandler was a recovering alcoholic, or maybe an on and off alcoholic. So he was showing some of these symptoms himself. So that kind of inspired him to do this movie and to try and understand what it was really like to be an alcoholic and how it might have felt from the inside, I guess, which is what we saw. We saw Don's perspective on most things. Yeah.
And Wilder tried to make it as realistic as possible. So he shot on location. Well, he shot mostly in the studio, but on the occasions where he was shooting in New York, he actually hid cameras to capture Milland as he walked down the streets, and so that the actual pedestrians who were part of the scene didn't even know they were in a movie. I'm not sure you could do that these days.
No, I don't think so.
I think you've got to actually get people to sign off.
There was probably a moment in time in the 1940s when you could do that.
Yeah.
Is that what they did in the addiction ward too, the alcohol ward?
I think so. Well, they got special permission to shoot in the ward, so maybe they were real people. I'm not sure. Maybe I have no idea. I mean, certainly the guy who played the nurse wasn't a real nurse, but yeah,
surprise,
maybe the background people.
There's Uncle Bob in a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's hope that those poor people in the addiction ward didn't get filmed without their consent.
Yes.
But anyway, the other famous movie is Sunset Boulevard. Then he did what else? A 7-Year Itch.
Yeah, Some Like It Hot, Starlag 17, The Apartment. So he went on a pretty good run after this. So a decent director is Billy Wilder, even if this wasn't particularly our favourite movie.
And he met his wife on the ward. He fell in love on the shoot, right?
Yes, she was an extra, Audrey Young. I think she was in the scene where he was being a pickpocket. She was supposed to hand him a coat, like she was like the coat attendant or something. But all you could see in the final movie was her hand handing the coat over. But that was enough. He fell in love with her hand.
Yep.
And Wilder was married at the time they shot this movie, but shortly after he wasn't. So he married her in 1949. So
good work.
And apparently they were together for ages after that. So
yeah, that's good.
Good on them.
Jolly good.
This is ordinarily where we do the best lines, right?
Yeah, and there are none.
There are nothing particularly entertaining.
Nothing grabbed our attention. But what about the Bechdel test, Dan? Does it pass?
No, it's a big fail. There's only really a couple of named women, right? And I don't think they have any conversation between them. And
if they did, they'd just be talking about Don.
Yeah. So Helen has a conversation with the landlady at one point. I'm not sure the landlady has a name, but again, all they ever talk about is Don's drinking. So
yeah, that's right.
No chance. Don's dominated this. What about technology? How would technology impact or improve or change the plot?
Well, I think that with a mobile phone, Helen would have had a lot more, success in getting in contact, perhaps with Don. But I think he would have just screened the calls, wouldn't he?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when he was home, he was screening the calls, right? She kept trying to call him at home, and he'd just ignore it.
Never answered.
So yeah, I think maybe she should just slip an AirTag into his coat jacket or something and track him that way. I think that's probably the only way to keep track of him. Although he only went to a couple of places, right? He went to the bar, then home, then to the bar, then home.
That's right.
And the only time he went anywhere else was when he ran out of money or fell down the stairs.
Yeah, I feel like he should have been putting an AirTag on his bottles that he kept losing.
Yeah, that'd be good. Ding, ding, ding.
Ding,
Where
ding.
is it?
Yeah, where is it?
Yes.
Anyway.
I've also got Uber Eats. Would have probably solved a lot of the problems here. He could have just delivered Don some whiskey whenever he felt like it, and put it on the credit card and sorted it out next month. Like not current Don's problem. That's next month Don's problem.
Yeah.
Or probably more realistically, it's probably Wick's problem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wick probably has to sort it out.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So you would have been pawning some different equipment probably in the age of modern technology.
Yeah. I mean, you could get a lot more for a laptop than a typewriter, I'm certain.
It was a very small typewriter.
It was
Very
pretty
portable.
neat. Yeah, very portable. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that works. Tributes, homages, remakes. We do have a couple of TV remakes. These Robert Montgomery Presents The Lost Weekend and Craft Theatre The Lost Weekend. They came out back-to-back in 1955 and 1956. There was also apparently a radio version not long after this movie came out as well. The other one I've got here is Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, which is a Steve Martin movie. And it features a black and white Steve Martin solving a nefarious crime that's very cleverly made up of re-edited scenes from old film noir movies, which seems like the hardest possible way to do a parody movie. But he did it. Well done, Steve. And The Lost Weekend was one of the movies in that. So
That'd be nice to watch for try and spot the various scenes.
Yeah, it would be. And I guess the only other possible homage that occurred to me as I was watching this, I was looking at, particularly right at the beginning, a couple of brothers, one of whom is a recovering alcoholic. It felt like a very dark and unfunny episode of the sitcom Frasier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh dear. So we usually try and get our Oscar movies lined up. We've had 3 of them so far.
Yep.
Wings and The Godfather.
Yep.
And so how could we possibly get Don into one of these other movies?
Well, I'm not sure we can get Don in. I think the era's good because we've got
the Second World War.
And we know that Michael Corleone fought in the Second World War. So, but Don may not have fought in World War II. I think he was too busy, trying to be a writer or trying to drink. But I think Wick might have. Wick might have been in, wherever Michael Corleone was. I think he'd have been there. Maybe that's who he was going to visit that weekend. Maybe he was off to the wedding of at the beginning of The Godfather. I'm not quite sure that works out time-wise, but let's say it does.
I think that all checks out. And if it wasn't that wedding, it would have been, there's plenty in the family.
Exactly.
It would have been
big
another one of the cousins and so on. That's a very good thought.
And that explains probably why the Wicks got into the hitman business, as we alluded to earlier in John Wick. So it all ties together quite nicely.
Tying together really well.
All right.
And it also, it adds fuel to we should have been following Wick on his weekend rather than watching his brother drink himself to death.
Yes. All right. The Hitchcock movie checklist. Let's start with the MacGuffin. Do we have a MacGuffin in this one?
It feels like the MacGuffin is just Don's occupation.
Yeah,
I mean, he could have been anything, right?
Yeah. So certainly no need for him to be a writer.
No.
And he goes on and on about it endlessly, but he's very easily distracted from doing it.
It's also such a stereotype, isn't it, that writers drink? I mean, he could have been a musician. That would be another effective stereotype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is based upon, the writer who wrote it who was an alcoholic, so that's a stereotype based on reality. But writers writing about writing is one of my peeves as well. So create a character that's not a writer if you're a proper writer.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think Don's writing career, let's call that the MacGuffin. What about a cameo?
No cameo.
A bit of a missed opportunity, all right? I think there's plenty of places he could. I mean, he may have been in one of the background scenes with all the other people, walking down the street.
That's right.
But I think he would have been better as a random drunk in a hospital. He could have just.
He would have been one of the people in the theatre for the flashback, getting with a coat check.
Yeah. Plenty.
Trying to get his coat done. Yeah. If it was Hitchcock, that is.
If it was Hitchcock, yeah.
And Hitchcock also would have had a mother character, and we don't really have a mother character. There's a landlady.
Yeah. The landlady doesn't really.
She doesn't really do much.
She only appears for 1 or 2 scenes.
Yeah. So I guess Helen's kind of the mother character.
Helen's the closest you've got.
There's not much romance there.
No, she's very much the mothering Don through this through all these problems. So, birds and animals.
Yes, hallucinated birds and animals.
Birds and animals. Yes. No pink elephants. They did call that out specifically, as they don't see pink elephants. They see small, scary animals. So,
Yikes.
Yes. Lead character at a standstill standstill or on the run.
Yeah, effectively.
Yeah.
Don really is at a standstill.
Yeah, so basically...
He's on the run from his brother too, kind of.
He's kind of on the run. Well, his brother's on the run from him.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, Don's locked into this cycle. All he does is go to the local bar to drink, then goes home to drink. So, and pretty much on the few occasions he's forced out of that cycle, he's basically just has to flee from either the bar he's gone to or the hospital and gets back to the safety of his routine.
That's right. So no real characters with elements of good or bad.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to...
They're either good or bad, aren't they?
Yeah,
these ones?
we're supposed to sympathise with... I mean, they do talk about this supposed dichotomy of, Don the writer and Don the drunk. There's a big speech about that. I'm yet to be convinced that Don the writer is a real person. I think it's just Don the drunk.
Don the drunk occasionally puts a couple of words down on paper.
Yeah. What about the smart young woman?
Well, no, not really. No. I mean, film noir never has a smart young woman, right? They're always dumb broads.
Yeah, but aren't some of them like sirens who, are luring idiot men to their deaths or idiot detectives to their deaths?
Maybe.
Sometimes femme fatales.
Sometimes, yeah, maybe.
But certainly not in this movie. The only real women in this movie are both seduced by whatever attraction they have for Don and causes them to both do stupid things.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. It was the most film noir thing about the movie, almost.
Yeah.
No bumbling cops either.
We do have bumbling nurses though, right? Because they had one hallucinating patient, and pretty much every nurse in the hospital went to deal with him and allowed Don to sneak out the side door.
That's right. Yeah, he got out quite easily there.
Yeah. Staircases, we did have the big tumble down the staircase as Don... there was a small child coming up and he tried to sidestep the child, but he was too drunk to keep his feet and went for a tumble.
Yes, indeed.
We do have some other tropes. These are the tvtropes.org tropes. So we've got drunken montage, this is the original montage of a drunk person wandering the streets as neon signs float around them. So
yes.
we've all seen that a zillion times since.
Yep.
This was the original, so full credit to that. That's kind of Hitchcockian. We've often noticed in Hitchcock a lot of things that are almost cliches now, but Hitchcock actually came up with first. Yep. The other tropes we've got here, we've got getting crap past the radar. So as we mentioned, we do have Gloria the prostitute, but she's never explicitly stated as a prostitute. She
keeps meeting strangers in the pub though, doesn't she?
And she explains later to Don that she's got business dates. So I think we get the idea. We've also got the trope, as we alluded to earlier, love makes you dumb. This is poor old Gloria and Helen. They're both. And another first, we got Theremin, the first film to feature a theremin on the soundtrack. The theremin of alcoholism, I began thinking about it, because it only came up as he got worse and worse.
Yeah, that's right.
Stronger and stronger.
Definitely.
All right. So now we get to the whole reason for watching The Lost Weekend, and that's to compare Spellbound to The Lost Weekend.
Well, Spellbound was much better.
I enjoyed Spellbound more too.
Than The Lost Weekend, in my opinion. I mean, some people would have appreciated a far more serious movie.
Yes.
I thought it was really interesting though. Spellbound was very much about, amnesia, a guy with amnesia, and this one was about addiction. I mean, it's really, they're both on the theme of mental health here, in a way.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of things that Spellbound could have done to get some Oscar juice. The best actor, which The Lost Weekend got. So what could Gregory Peck have done to get the Oscar? He
should have been having a bit more rye whiskey, right?
I think so, yeah. Amnesia didn't quite cut it. He should have had something else. Because apart from that, there's not much difference between their roles, right? He's lots of helplessness. Their love interest sorting everything out for them. Yeah. And although apparently I did enjoy this, Ray Milland didn't give an acceptance speech at the Oscars. He came up, got his Best Actor Oscar, just acknowledged the crowd's applause, and then left without saying a word. So
I wish they'd
more
all
Oscar speeches like that.
Yeah, I wish they'd all do that. Yeah. They're fantastic.
Although a few days later he appeared on a radio show apparently, and they did a parody. I think it was the Jack Benny Show, and they did a parody of this particular movie. And in the end, they kind of went to the final scene, or one of the later scenes where he's hallucinating all the animals. And the animals were voiced by Mel Blanc, Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, etc. And apparently
fantastic.
He got rid of them, and they said, how'd you get rid of that? He said, I threw my Oscar at it.
Oh, it's so very funny. So what about Best Director? What could Hitchcock have done to get this director away from Wilder?
Yeah, well, I think as you mentioned earlier, I think it's a marketing error, right? He should have. The Academy's far more familiar with alcoholics than amnesiacs, I'm certain. So he's very, very big marketing error. He should have needed to target his movies a bit better if he wanted an Oscar.
Yeah, and a lot more opportunities for merchandise. The rye whiskey rather than the Freudian therapy.
Yes.
So the screenplay, I feel like, was there much of a screenplay if they just adapted the book completely? They were pretty true to this book, weren't they?
I think so, yeah. I didn't read the book this was based on, but I got the gist that it was very similar. They dropped there were some strong homosexual undertones in the book, apparently, because the writer was homosexual. So they cut that out of the movie. But, compare that to Spellbound, because I did read the book that Spellbound was based on, the House of Dr. Edwards, and there were a lot of changes from the book to the movie.
Should Hitchcock have kept the book?
No, because the book was wild. The book was crazy. But maybe he should have just made it less difficult for himself by choosing a book to adapt that didn't require basically an entire new story. All he kept was a couple of character names. That was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Well, I like the fact that there were some Hitchcock elements in this movie as well. There was a lot of really lovely film noir elements, like reflections in mirrors, reflections of the barman, reflections of the gun,
and the wine bottle.
The wine bottle on the roof.
Yeah,
and that initial shot through the window was kind of Hitchcockian.
Yeah,
too,
that was very much
we
like the beginning of Psycho, right?
Yeah, it was very much like the beginning of Psycho.
Yeah.
Lots of close-ups of eyes and shadows in the detox water in the street and so on. So there was a few Hitchcock elements there, and maybe Spellbound could have been a bit more film noir, and then maybe would have done something there.
Or going the other way, I think the Lost Weekend's hallucination scene could have definitely used some more Salvador Dali in there. Get some really wild things going in there, not just a bat and a mouse.
That would be fantastic.
Giraffes on fire and melting clocks and stuff.
Yeah, I can think of lots of ways the Lost Weekend could be improved, and maybe a plot would help. Some kind of, it was, just felt very much just like an aimless moment in time, and I'm not a big fan of that kind of movie. I do need a bit of a plot, a murder, preferably of Don.
Yeah, that would have been ideal.
Yeah.
And we find out it's Wick at the end. That's why he disappeared.
Yeah, or even, Wick could have disappeared by being murdered, and then he could have just still gone on his bender, and then we never find out who did anything.
Yeah.
I think The Lost Weekend, when I was thinking about it, could have been a silent movie. It didn't need any dialogue at all.
Well,
because I found that bit
probably not. There were a lot of very preachy speeches, weren't there?
Yeah, there were.
And again, this is
self-pitying speeches from Don over and over about why.
But it's kind of tied to, like, if you're doing kind of this breakthrough message movie that's taking something seriously that was never taken seriously before, you kind of.
You have to sympathise with
I think
Don.
it's very difficult to not fall into the trap of having preachy speeches that explain to the audience what you're trying to do. So
that's true. I think Hitchcock would have improved The Lost Weekend by having two gay friends, not brothers.
Yeah.
At
first
the start,
I thought they were gay. Yeah.
I absolutely thought they were gay at the start. I thought, these guys are packing for a holiday together in the same bedroom. That's this is a gay couple.
Yep. Yes.
Wouldn't have been overtly said, but that would have been he would have been his close friend.
Yep.
Rather than his brother.
Yep. Yes. All right. So having done all that, I think we both agree that we preferred Spellbound to The Lost Weekend.
Yep.
But where do we rank The Lost Weekend compared to the other two Oscar movies we've seen? So to recap, we've seen The Godfather and Wings.
So Wings was out of these. Wings is my favourite. The Godfather comes number 2, which I never thought The Godfather would ever come number 2 on anything. And The Lost Weekend comes number 3 on my list.
Yeah, The Lost Weekend is number 3 on my list as well, although I do have The Godfather 1, Wings 2, and we'll see. I think there may be a few of these Oscar movies that we watched that may be similarly not aged brilliantly.
I think Wings was fabulous.
Oh, Wings was fantastic. Wings is the oldest one, and it was great.
Yeah, incredible.
Anyway, as we mentioned, our next movie will be the 17th best Hitchcock movie, as voted on by you guys, our listeners. And the cryptic clue, so let's go through the cryptic clue again, was no guy parts and a selection of actresses, plain, no centerfolds, for this English Hitchcock film. So So
3 words, 5, 3, and 8 letters. The answer is young and innocent.
Yes.
And let's explain the cryptic clue. No guy parts is parts is an anagram indicator, and no guy will rearrange to the word young.
Yep.
Then we have the word and, which is just sitting there.
Yep.
And we've just got innocent to find, and that is made up of a selection of actresses playing no centerfolds. And if you find where at the end of plain is IN, you can get the word innocent out of the mixture of the next 3 words.
Yep.
So selection just means take a few bits of this next phrase. So it's in no centerfolds.
Yes.
And that's fantastic. Very good cryptic clue, Dan.
Yes. So that's what we're doing. A rewatch of Young and Innocent from 1937. You originally ranked this 11th, so
Yeah.
you've got this well in your
I'm
your top
looking
20.
very much forward to this rewatch, and very, very astute of the patrons to vote this so high.
I had a 22nd, so I'm
Yeah.
not far off the mark here.
Yeah.
So we'll have to check whether our opinions change after the rewatch, and we will let you know probably later this month. We'll try and crack onto this one. So if you have any questions or feedback on Young and Innocent, feel free to email them in. You can do that at feedback@hitchpodonline.com, and we'll do our best to answer them in the next episode.
And do we have a book?
We do have a book. We've got A Shilling for Candles by Josephine Thay. This was the book that this particular movie is based on, and it is available on Project Gutenberg,
Fantastic.
which means it's free. You can just go track down a copy, and we will speak to you all soon.
See you then. Thank you for listening to HitchPod. Please come and talk to us on Twitter at HitchPod Tweets or on Facebook by searching for HitchPod. And you can also email us directly at feedback@hitchpodonline.com. And if you want more Hitchcock content, please consider becoming a HitchPod supporter. Just go to patreon.com/HitchPod. And for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to our Season 1 coverage of every single Hitchcock movie, as well as bonus episodes on Hitchcock-esque movies. Invitations also to watch live rewatches and much, much more.